Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. It was a quiet Friday evening, the kind that slips in slowly, like a soft sigh at the end of a long week. The world outside had dimmed into twilight, and in our cozy little apartment, everything felt still, almost too still. I was sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone, waiting for my husband to return from work. We'd been married for just over a year, and though things weren't perfect, I believed I knew him. I truly believed I knew everything about the man I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with. But that night, something changed. He walked through the door, and at first, everything seemed normal. He smiled, set down his keys, kissed my forehead. But there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. A quiet storm brewing behind his usual calm. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it had just been a long day. Maybe he was tired, or distracted. But the way he looked at me that night was different. As if he had something on his mind, something he couldn't say out loud yet. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just work stress. We had dinner together, just the two of us. The table was set like always, our favorite music playing softly in the background. But the silence between us grew louder with every passing minute. I caught him staring at me once or twice, then quickly looking away. And when I finally asked him what was wrong, he hesitated. He looked at me with a tenderness I'd never seen before, and a heaviness in his voice that made my heart skip. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said quietly, but I didn't know how. That's when my world shifted. In that moment, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down into the unknown. My stomach tightened. My hands trembled. 1,000 questions rushed through my mind, but I couldn't voice even one. All I could do was nod and wait for him to continue. He reached for my hand, his grip was warm but nervous. And then, in the softest whisper, he said something that would change the way I saw him forever. But before he could finish, his phone rang. And everything paused. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What did he say? What was he hiding? Trust me, I asked myself the same thing that night. Over and over again. Sometimes, the people we love the most hold secrets they believe will protect us. But what if those secrets only end up breaking us? So tell me, have you ever discovered something about your partner that left you speechless? Something you weren't ready for? Let's talk about it in the comments. I want to hear your stories, your thoughts, your feelings. Because sometimes, sharing helps us understand our own hearts better. And if you've ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew turned upside down, drop a broken heart in the comments, or maybe a red heart hash if you believe that love, no matter how complicated, is always worth fighting for. Stay tuned, because in the next part, I'll tell you what he said after that phone call, and trust me, it's not what I expected. Not even close. So hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments. What would you do if your partner suddenly revealed a side of themselves you never saw coming? Because that night, I learned something about my husband I wasn't ready for. And it changed everything. He didn't answer the phone right away. It kept ringing while we just sat there, his hand still holding mine, eyes locked, as if we were both afraid that the moment would vanish if either of us moved. I could see the conflict written all over his face, like he was torn between two worlds. He finally pulled his hand back, glanced at the screen, then pressed decline. My heart raced faster. Whoever it was, they had called at the exact moment he was about to tell me something important. Something heavy. And now that silence returned, thick and uncomfortable, stretching out between us like a wall we couldn't climb. He opened his mouth like he was going to speak again, but then shook his head, almost to himself. "Maybe it's not the right time," he whispered. I stared at him, stunned. "You just said you've been meaning to tell me. If not now, then when?" My voice wasn't angry, just confused. And scared. Because the man sitting across from me, the one I had built a life with, suddenly felt like a stranger holding a truth I couldn't touch. He looked away, toward the window, where the city lights flickered far below. "You're not ready," he said quietly, almost like he was trying to convince himself more than me. "Not ready for what?" I asked. My voice cracked a little. That's when I started noticing things. Little things. The way his jaw tensed when I brought up certain topics. The way he would come home late and say nothing about where he had been. The days when he seemed lost in thought, staring out the window like he was waiting for something or someone. It had started long before that night. I just hadn't seen it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to see it. I looked at him differently now. Not with suspicion exactly, but with uncertainty. And that might be worse. Because when you love someone, you build this picture of them in your mind. Their likes, their habits, their little quirks. You think you know them like a favorite book, every chapter memorized. But what happens when you suddenly realize there's a whole part of their story you never even opened? We sat in silence for a long time. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful. The kind that feels like something is waiting to snap. To distract myself, I picked up his phone from the table. I didn't mean to invade his privacy. It was just instinct. Curiosity. Fear. The name on the screen from the missed call was just a first name. No photo. No clue. Just Ion. A name I didn't recognize. I tilted the phone slightly, wondering why my husband would avoid a call from someone whose name he wouldn't explain. He noticed. Gently took the phone from my hand. "Please don't," he said, voice low. Not angry, just sad. I didn't say anything. Because I didn't know what to say anymore. He stood up, paced for a moment, then finally stopped and looked at me with a kind of vulnerability I hadn't seen in him before. "You remember when we promised to always tell each other the truth?" he asked. I nodded slowly. Of course I remembered. It was one of the vows we wrote ourselves. "Well," he sighed, "I've kept part of myself hidden, even from you. Not because I wanted to lie. But because I was afraid the truth would change everything." And there it was again, that cliffhanger feeling. Like I was standing right on the edge, waiting to fall. He didn't say anything more. Just walked into the bedroom and closed the door behind him. And I sat there, frozen. Questions swirling in my head like a storm I couldn't stop. Who was Ion? What was he hiding? Was this about love? Or something else entirely? Have you ever felt like someone close to you had a whole other life you never knew about? Let me know in the comments, what would you do if the person you loved most started pulling away in silence? Drop a clock hash if you've ever waited too long for the truth. Or a eyes if you're staying tuned for what happens next. Because the truth isn't just knocking, it's about to kick the door wide open. The hours after he shut the bedroom door felt like an eternity. I sat there in the half-lit living room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The sound of the clock ticking was the only thing breaking the silence. My mind kept going back to that name, Ion. Who was he? A friend? A mistake? A memory? The more I tried to convince myself it could be something innocent, the more that small voice inside me whispered, but what if it's not? I didn't go after him. Part of me wanted answers, wanted to shake the truth out of him. But another part was scared. Scared of what I might hear. Sometimes, silence is easier than truth, even when it hurts. The next morning, we acted like nothing had happened. He came out of the room, got ready for work, gave me a faint smile, and kissed my forehead like always. But his eyes were tired. His voice lacked warmth. He didn't mention the night before, and I didn't push. I just stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own kitchen. But the tension didn't leave. It grew roots in our home, in the space between every word we didn't say. Over the next few days, I started noticing more signs. He was more distracted than usual. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his phone, typing quickly and then deleting things before I could see. He wasn't cold, but he was distant. Like he was living two lives at once, and I was only part of one. And then something happened that made my heart race all over again. I was doing laundry, and while folding his clothes, I found a piece of paper tucked in the back pocket of his jeans. It was folded twice and had no name on it, but the handwriting wasn't his. It simply read, "You know what you have to do. You can't keep this secret forever." I just stood there, staring at it, feeling like my legs might give out. Who had written it? What secret? Was this connected to Ion? Or was it something even deeper? I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed more than fragments. I needed to understand the full picture. But now I was torn between trust and fear. Between love and suspicion. One night, I decided to follow him. I know, it sounds like something out of a movie, but when the person you love starts hiding pieces of themselves, sometimes all you can do is try to see what they're not telling you. He said he was going to a late meeting. But I watched from the window as he left the apartment, got into a car, and drove in the opposite direction of his office. I followed at a distance, heart pounding the whole time. He pulled into a quiet street, parked, and got out. I stayed in my car, hidden behind a tree. A few minutes later, someone approached him. A man. Tall, dressed in black. They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. But they talked closely, quietly. I couldn't hear anything, but I didn't need to. I could feel it. This wasn't just a random meeting. What do you think is happening here? Who do you think the man was? Was it Ion? Or someone else? Comment below, what would you do if you saw your partner meeting someone in secret? Would you confront them right away, or wait to gather more proof? Because right now, I was deep in something I never saw coming, and I was only just beginning to uncover the truth. I sat in my car, barely breathing, watching them from the shadow of the trees. The street was dimly lit, quiet except for the occasional passing car. My husband and the man, who I still wasn't sure was Ion, stood close, their faces tense, words exchanged in low voices that didn't carry to where I was. I could see my husband gesturing with his hands, frustrated, almost pleading. The other man remained still, calm, like someone who had the upper hand. I wanted to get out. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the quiet hope that whatever this was, it wasn't what it looked like. But the way my husband kept glancing around, the way he checked his phone in between talking, like he was nervous about being seen, it didn't feel right. Then, something strange happened. The man handed him a small envelope. My husband took it without question and tucked it inside his coat pocket. It wasn't money, at least not from what I could tell. It didn't look thick enough. But it was something. Something that made my stomach twist with dread. He nodded once, then turned to leave, walking back toward his car without ever looking in my direction. I ducked low in my seat until he passed, heart thudding against my ribs like a drum. As soon as he drove off, I debated whether I should follow him or confront the man he'd just met. But my hands were shaking. My thoughts were spiraling. I needed time to think. That night, he came home like nothing had happened. He walked in, kissed my cheek, asked if I had eaten. I watched him carefully, looking for a trace of guilt, something in his eyes that would confirm my suspicions. But he was calm. Too calm. He even joked about the weather, poured himself a glass of water, and sat next to me on the couch. The envelope was still in his coat pocket, hanging quietly on the rack by the door. Every part of me screamed to ask him about it, to pull it out and demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat beside him, smiling faintly, heart pounding. What do you think was inside that envelope? I waited until he was asleep. I lay beside him, listening to his soft breathing, thinking back on every little moment over the past few months that now felt like a breadcrumb I hadn't noticed. Late meetings. Silent dinners. That letter I found in his jeans. The way he sometimes looked at me like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I slipped out of bed quietly, tiptoed to his coat, and reached inside the pocket. The envelope was there. Thin. Unmarked. My fingers trembled as I pulled it out. And just as I started to open it, I heard a voice behind me. "What are you doing?" I turned slowly, and there he was. Standing in the hallway. Awake. Watching me. My heart dropped. Now tell me, what do you think happens next? What would you do in that moment, confront the truth, or put the envelope back and pretend nothing happened? Leave a comment, tell me your theories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Because what's coming next will change everything. His voice stopped me cold. That same gentle voice I'd grown to love now sent a chill down my spine. The envelope was still in my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. I turned to face him, my eyes adjusting to the dim light in the hallway. He didn't, I needed to know. He stepped forward, slow and calm, like he was walking toward something he'd been running from for a long time. "If you open that," he said, "you'll see a part of me I've tried to protect you from." That word, protect, hit me hard. Protect me from what? Was it something dangerous? Something shameful? My hands trembled as I looked down at the envelope again, questions swirling faster than I could think. "Tell me what's in it," I said quietly. "Just tell me. No more secrets." But instead of answering, he asked me a question. "Do you trust me?" That's when I realized, this wasn't just about whatever was inside the envelope. This was about us. About whether the love we'd built could survive whatever storm he was hiding behind his silence. Before I could speak, his phone buzzed on the side table. We both looked at it. The screen lit up with a message that made my blood freeze. "Ion, it's time. She deserves the truth." My breath caught. So it was Ion. And not just some passing name. He was still involved. Still connected. And he knew about me. I looked back at my husband. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why is Ion texting you about me?" That's when he finally sat down. Shoulders slumped. Like the weight of it all had finally gotten too heavy to carry. "Ion isn't just someone I work with," he began, eyes locked on the floor. "He's part of my past. A past I never thought I'd have to explain to you." The words hung in the air like fog. Part of his past? A secret tied so deeply to his life that even after our marriage, he hadn't shared it. My head spun with possibilities. Was it family? Debt? Something illegal? Or something even more personal? I didn't press him. Not yet. I needed to understand the full story before reacting. But everything inside me was screaming for answers. Then, just when I thought I'd heard it all, he said something I never expected. "There's something else I need to show you," he whispered. "Something I've hidden in the apartment." And just like that, the ground beneath me shifted again. He stood up and started walking toward the back of the apartment. I followed, heart racing, unsure whether I was ready for whatever truth he was about to reveal. "What do you think he's hiding? Is it connected to Ion, or something even deeper? Comment your guesses below. What would you do if your partner kept a part of their past hidden, something that might change how you see them forever? Stay with me. Because what happens next turns everything upside down. He led me to the small storage room we hardly ever used. The door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but old boxes and dusty shelves. I stood there, confused. My heart was thudding in my chest as I watched him walk to the far corner and crouch down. He pulled out a box marked with his handwriting. I'd seen it before, but never thought to open it. It looked like the kind of box filled with tax papers or broken charges. But what he pulled out wasn't paperwork. It was a small photo album. Old. Worn at the edges. He placed it in my hands without a word, and I opened it slowly. The first photo stopped me cold. It was him, years younger, maybe in his early 20s, standing beside another man. The same man I saw him meet that night. Ion. They were laughing, arms around each other, the kind of joy you can't fake. Picture after picture showed moments that looked like a life I never knew existed. Trips. Birthdays. Quiet moments. The last photo, tucked into the back, was the most powerful. They were standing in front of a courthouse. Holding hands. Wearing rings. I looked up at him, stunned. "You were married?" He nodded, slowly. "We weren't public. It wasn't safe then. Our families didn't know. We didn't tell anyone. We thought it would be temporary. But life, it changed." I struggled to speak. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't know what to feel. I sat down on the cold floor, the album still in my lap, the weight of his past settling into the silence between us. "I never lied to you about loving you," he said softly, kneeling beside me. "What Ion and I had, it ended. Not because we wanted it to, but because we had no choice. When I met you, I never expected to feel that way again. But I did. I do. And I didn't tell you, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't know how you'd look at me after." There was so much emotion in his voice. A kind of fear I hadn't seen before. He wasn't trying to escape the truth anymore, he was finally standing in it. And then, as if the moment wasn't already heavy enough, he handed me the envelope. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. From Ion. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was closure. He wrote about how he and my husband had decided to finally let go of the past. How love, in its truest form, is about choosing someone again and again, even when the past knocks at the door. Ion had wanted me to know not to ruin anything, but to make sure I understood the whole man I had married. I sat there, tears in my eyes, overwhelmed. The main conflict in my heart wasn't betrayal. It was the fear that I had never really known my husband. But now, I did. Every scar, every layer, every truth. We held each other for a long time, saying nothing. Just breathing. Just existing in the rawness of that moment. And I thought that was the end of the story. But it wasn't. 3 days later, a letter arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a photograph. It was Ion. With a child. And written on the back, in messy handwriting, were 5 words that changed everything all over again. He deserves to know, too. Now tell me, what do you think happens next? Who is the child? What secret still lingers? Comment your thoughts and theories below. Do you believe love can survive every truth? Because just when you think the story ends, another chapter begins. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding the photo in one hand and the words on the back echoing in my mind. He deserves to know, too. The child in the picture had Ion's eyes, and something about the smile felt oddly familiar. I could barely breathe. Could this child be connected to my husband? If so, how? And why now? He came into the room a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel, completely unaware of what had just landed in our world. I handed him the envelope. He read it in silence. His eyes scanned the photograph, the message, and I saw his expression change, first confusion, then realization, and finally, pain. He sat down slowly, the photo still in his hands. I didn't know, he whispered. Ion never told me. We hadn't spoken in years until recently. He didn't mention a child. Not once. We spent the next few days reaching out, waiting. It was Ion who finally messaged. He confirmed the truth, yes, the boy was his son. And yes, he believed my husband might be the father. It had been during the final days of their relationship, before they parted ways without closure. A time filled with confusion, decisions made in silence, and emotions too complicated to unravel back then. A DNA test followed, the kind of waiting that stretches the heart. And in time, the answer came. My husband was not the biological father. It was a wave of relief and heartbreak all at once. Relief for the clarity. Heartbreak for the years Ion had carried the secret alone, wondering if things could have been different. Ion and my husband met once more after that, face to face, as men no longer running from their past. They talked for hours. I wasn't there for it, but I didn't need to be. My husband came home lighter. Not because the burden was gone, but because the truth had finally found its place. And us. We healed. Slowly. Tenderly. The way real love does after a storm. We talked more than ever. About who we were, what we'd both been carrying, and the future we wanted to build, not on secrets or shadows, but on truth and trust. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I fell in love with him again. Not just the version I married, but the whole man. Sometimes, the people we love come with stories we weren't ready to read. But loving someone fully means turning every page. So here we are. Stronger. Wiser. More real than ever. And every now and then, I still think of that night, the night I thought everything was falling apart. Turns out, it was the night everything finally came together. How did this story make you feel? Would you have made the same choices? And, do you think this story deserves a sequel? Let me know in the comments, I read every one of them. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves real, raw, emotional relationship stories. Because sometimes, the most unforgettable tales are the ones that feel the closest to home.